Hello, Culture Matters Podcast. I'm so excited for this episode. Before I introduce you to our guest, here is here are three quotes I picked just for this episode. Methods change. Human nature doesn't. The principles that built yesterday's business are the same principles that will build tomorrow's business. Only the tools have changed. And lastly, I love this one for today. The amateur seeks certainty before taking action.
Mm.
The professional acts, learns, adjusts, and compounds. Today, I'm introducing to you to a regular guest of the Culture Runners podcast. If you haven't listened to episode 46 that we released in April of 2020, it's a must listen to episode, so strong in so many ways on the fundamentals. Episode 397, I believe we released in 2024 with our guest today, the one and only Mike Husson. RealProfitBuilders.com has been a teacher, a mentor, a coach in many contexts, and someone that has influenced directly and indirectly many of the greats in the personal development world and worked alongside some of the greatest names that you've heard. I consider Mike a mentor. I'm so excited and a friend to talk about the 8 phases of mastery that Mike, you've been mastering for some time now, I believe. So thanks for coming on the Culture Matters podcast.
I think I had to master being born is what that's the beginning phase. Actually, wasn't my first phase was my parents' desire to have a great kid like me, but anyway, I digress.
Well, that makes me think of actually, I wanted to ask you about this last quote. The firstly, before we get into mastery, what that means to you, some of the origins. It looks like you perked up there. The amateur seeks certainty before taking action. The professional acts, learns, adjusts, and compounds. What is your take on that quote?
There's a lot of people that want the fire, but they don't think about chopping and carrying the wood. In all due respect, we have a vision, we want something, we want to make an impact in our businesses, we want to lead well, we want to have a good culture, we want to have all these things, whether you're beginning or you're in the middle of your business or you're an executive, whatever the case might be. Oftentimes, you know, especially in today's world, the speed of light is everything today. And we'll talk about this, I think, a little bit later, but with artificial intelligence, it we assume that, well, I can get ahead of the skis, get ahead of the curve much quicker, So therefore, shortening the curve of results, not skills, not knowledge, but of results. In other words, I can go in and put a prompt in, Google it or whatever, and we get an answer, and there's the solution to my challenges. There's the solution to my huge business that I want, et cetera, et cetera. And it gives you context. It gives you context. Context begins here. I mean, that's part of the phases. So I think that just to, keep it simple, it is that idea that and I remember this for myself when I started out, there's a book behind me. I don't know if you can see it over here, but Think and Grow Rich with Napoleon Hill, right? And this is kind of where this evolved from for me with these 8 phases. I was in the restaurant business up in West Virginia, and we had shut down the business in 1981. Economy was in, squirmish at the time, 21% plus interest rates at the time. Anyway,
Wow.
so I was leaving, to come back to Miami. I'm originally from South Florida. And I went to Walden's Book, if anybody recalls that bookstore. But just this was the day, literally the day before I was leaving to come back to Florida, and we had a pretty successful venture at the time. We had a comedy club, nightclub, all those kinds of things. And if you want to chat about that later, but or another time. But anyway, I was walking through the bookstore and I walked in. There was a banner on the wall that says business psychology. If you ever been to a bookstore, they have those sections, right? So I'm thinking to myself, what am I going to do? I gotta I want to be something. I'm an entrepreneur, you know, no college. I had a year and a half at a community college in Miami-Dade. It wasn't, and I did it just for, I don't know, dating girls, I guess. I don't know at that time. Anyway, so I'm thinking to myself, what am I going to do? I was young and I was, ambitious at the time, and I'm walking through and I'm thinking I want to be rich, and I'm thinking and I'm thinking, and all of a sudden, serendipitously, what comes up on the shelf in front of us? Book Think and Grow Rich.
Yeah.
I was thinking I want to be rich.
Wow.
Grabbed the book, paid $2.95 for a paperback. It was white with green lettering on it. I read a couple of chapters in it in the beginning, or a couple of pages, excuse me, not a couple of chapters. And it was really something that I want, because I was studying. Part of that was I studied Andrew Carnegie when I was in high school. The robber barons of the day, Rockefeller and all of those guys. And so I missed on clarifying. I think that's oftentimes what happens, Jay, is we
Ah.
have these ambitions, we have these dreams, and we think because somebody else has done it, we forget what goes on behind the curtains, so to speak. So important to that point, I was going through this, and I'd learned that you got to put in the effort before you get the result. And it's not just to get the result, but it is the effort that we should put in, because it helps us to develop maturity, right? If I just take what you've done and go and put it into play without having any relative experience of it, I can see what you do, I can watch what you do, I can look to model what you do, or in my mind model that. I can like to see Jay, that result he's got, Bezos and Jay and Buffett, all those things, but we forget what goes on behind the curtains. So it is that development of that muscle that
Hmm.
it is the chopping of the wood, but you got to carry it. You got to chop it, you got to carry it. And then when you finish chopping it and finish carrying it, then you create your fire. But now, if you want a bigger fire, i.e., scaling, as we like to talk about today, then we flip back on going back to what got us to where we are, and we just learn through that process. So can't skip ahead. I mean, now, ideally, you know, we like to, but still got to learn how to drive.
In your phase one, you said desire is what you want and then why you want it. Is that correct?
Yep. Yeah. It
Where
begins.
does that play a role in this, in the wanting the fire and then doing what's necessary for it to grow? Like I'm thinking the chopping the wood is a part of
Well, that's the
getting wood to
beginning.
make the fire. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's the beginning, because the desire, basically, so to speak, is our end result. You can categorize this however you like, but when people look at this, that desire, because it's like a thrown around word, what's your why? What's your big audacious goal? Things like this. And incredibly important to have those things, because you look at the end result. What do you want? I want this for this particular reason. And I say the word particular because it's not, I want to make a lot of money is not enough. It's a part of the process. I want to make enough money so I can do what I want when I want without having to ask permission. And then why is that important? So desire is that flavor of what's going to keep you up, because you're going to have obstacles, Jay. You know it as much as our audience knows it. I know it. I have t-shirts in front of me on the other side of the wall here that I look at every day to remind self that, you can have those things. So it begins with that thought in mind.
What are the t-shirts? What do they say?
Been there, done that. Failed at it, screwed it up. And I have some t-shirts that are green with success. I have
Huh.
placards of that. We all do. I mean, if we look at our wins in life, just the fact that you're probably listening to this, to me, I know it gets a little deep in here, but the fact that you're able to listen to this, learn from this, potentially do something with it, which is a part of the mastery thing, right, is a win, and it's a success. But those are the reminders that, I don't go back there except to go through the experience of, how did I get through that? That's the reminder for me. What did I do when I had to close my restaurant that was very successful, right? I mean, I had Jay Leno in my club, for crying out loud.
Wow.
That's, and I was a kid. I had no restaurant experience. I had no MBA. I had no I went to the school of hard knocks at the time.
What's one thing that you recognize of Jay Leno that was a standout attribute, characteristic, or I don't know.
Jay was, if you see Jay today in his off-screen environment where he's doing his cars and his personal life at some level, that was pretty much him. We had a Pac-Man machine in the restaurant, right? So we had him for 2 nights. He was at 4 shows, Friday 2 shows, Saturday 2 shows.
Wow.
And during the breaks, and when he got there, he goes, "Oh, Pac-Man," and he goes and sits down, and he was at the Pac-Man machine. I had a couple of conversations, interactions with him, but he was very laid back. It's that subtlety. And I actually, going back to your point there, I learned from that years later. I look back at that when I just mentioned the Pac-Man machine. I look back at that experience many times to see, how does a guy like this, who was on the road at that time, this was in the 80s, and those guys were, they would go from city to city. There were roadies, these comedians, a lot of them. Um, Few exceptions like Carson maybe didn't do all of that stuff, but they did it differently. But at the end of the day, I just learned that he was, I don't know if he was thinking. I don't know if he was contemplating the act, or that would, like me, I do routines that, maybe for a interview like this, I'm doing certain routines that mellow me out. Perhaps he was doing that. But I did notice that he was a nice guy, very nice guy, you know, and so much so he mentioned me on Carson.
Wow.
So it was exciting to have that experience.
You mentioned the roadies thing. Actually, that's a standout, and I'm curious if or where that fits in your uh, phases to mastery. But you said roadie, right? So I'm thinking now also. I re-listened to episode 46 and partial 397. There was 6 to 10 week segments where you and a team were going to offices of corporations of various sizes and on the road in the sense and presenting information. Additionally, there's a book behind you that's green, 100 million models. Many people may have heard of this Alex Hormozy person and his wife Layla Hormozy. I look earlier in their career, they would physically go to gym locations and turn around the businesses. And I'm wondering what, in your breadth of experience, is there something to that, being on the road? And you're saying Jay Leno and the comedians, right? They were on the road, they going to different cities, almost bringing the good news, as one would say.
Yeah,
So I'm curious, is that part of the road to mastery at some level?
100%.
And what's your thoughts, essentially?
I mean, listen, you need the reps. Part of it is that, and what we did, to your point, when we did big events with Tony, Brian Tracy, Les, you know, Pat Riley, Lou Holtz, God rest his soul, General Schwarzkopf. We did these events, and we had the desire to impact people. What is, we might look at it as transformation. Come to our seminars, and you're going to have an idea or two or 20 or 100, whatever, and you're going to go out and if you apply them, you're going to get results, right? So, um, because of my early years of not being so much university educated, I was the school of hard knocks kind of guy. I read a lot of books, the stuff behind me, things of this nature. I attended some seminars. I listened to videos, listened to audio cassettes from Nightingale Conant. You see Earl Nightingale, Essence of Success. Great book, by the way.
Yeah, I love
Everybody
that.
should get it. Nuggets. Speaking of Alex, he mentions about, you hear these quotes from Socrates and Aristotle. They're 10,000 years old. He always said, we always quote them today thinking that they're, well, this is from the old days. AI today is different. No, Socrates and Aristotle had these great quotes that, are still hold firm today. It's fundamental, right? But yeah, you learn the reps, Jay, doing those things.
I was gonna show you something, but
You,
I
you
got Play-Doh over there. I was like excited for a second.
well, you're going to talk to me about that later, but I'd love to because I know you're into that, and I'm very philosophical in a lot of senses, But yeah, the road trips, keeping it simple, were you didn't like it. You lived in corporate apartments, right? You had to put up with not knowing what city you were not knowing the city you were in. You knew the city you were at, but not knowing the engagement. You live where you live, and then you go to a strange city. So you had to mentally get prepared. But we had a mission, right? And that was put butts in seats for our event based on the goals that we have set. We reverse engineered it back down to what we needed to do to get to the process going. That was that 6 to 8 week period of time. So you learned you got to get it. Listen, if you get the reps in, that is the best experience. There's no books, there's no seminars, there's no video recordings that are going to develop it more. They
Mhm.
support and they serve and they bring value because what I think about to this question, Jay, and I think it's an invaluable question because I believe in some very simple things. I'm a fundamentalist. I'm very basic. I use AI. I hope everybody does because if you don't, somebody using it is going to take over your job, as we've heard this philosophy before of recent months and years, whatever. But anyway, I believe you go learn something, you go out and do it, then you review it, and then you rinse and repeat it. In other words, you go back and do it again because this is the development. This is where reps come in, and the key part is doing it, but also reviewing it. I plan to go do this. If you're in sales, I plan to go out and do marketing. Right, take that step. Okay, I learned this idea, and I go out and use that particular technique. Right, you go do the technique. Now, whether you succeed or fail at the result of the using the technique, it's not so much it's here nor there. It's just what happened, right? You didn't fail at it. You're not a failure. What you did didn't work, or what you did worked. Either one of those things. But it's incumbent upon us to learn something, go do something with it, and then review so you can articulate that mentally and then go repeat the same thing again and you'll have a different experience from it because now you have the real life. It's not just book knowledge, you know. There's the person who reads the book who has the knowledge, i.e., maybe professors. We can look at that as a way like that. There's the person who has gone to the trainings, been to the school, and they put it into play. And then there's those who read it, do it, and then they go out and teach it because they have an experience from it. So there's those levels of process there. So the reps, Jay, I think to your point, to your question, is that we have to get the reps in. Alex slept on floors. We slept in cars, not with, not because we were homeless, because we were doing our work throughout the day, and we took power naps between meetings.
Wow.
I mean, almost literally. I mean, I know I did, you know.
Some of the, before we go into decisions and commitments, right? Because I want to make sure I'm following you. You said learn, do, review, and repeat as a process, as like an operating system. If I have desire, I know what I want, and I also understand why. That's like step one, clarifying the goal, understanding purpose. And then you talk about decisions and commitments. So before that, what are some obstacles to getting in the reps that people might easily may easily overlook or not even realize? Like there's blind spots that are a part of life, a part of the average business person listening to this that would stop someone from getting the reps in. Like,
Well, that's between, yeah, what breaks our whys, maybe how I'm hearing this, what gets in our way, what stops us, what could it be? Other people, people that don't support you. I'm fearing judgment. I'm attached to outcomes, right? So I have this big dream, but my significant others in my world, family members, whatever, however you want to look at that, they're not inside of us. You know, I believe, to me, God gave me a dream, and somebody interrupts that. I want them to support me. But at the same time, I've learned if you don't support me, minimally disrespect what I'm doing. If I got to put in the extra hours, I got to go to, like my folks would tell me, where are you going? You're going out of town. Who's that guy you're working for with the big teeth on TV? Tony Robbins, right? And what do you really do? I've heard that thing. And that kind of interrupts our pattern of desire. Well, wait a minute, you're questioning me? I mean, I'm helping people transform their lives, like my dad. And I looked at my mom one day and said, like dad. And she goes, what do you mean? I go, Dad, my dad was a priest, Syrian Orthodox, right? Not Catholic. We can't get married, obviously. But anyway, and I said,
wow.
Dad got on stage at the church and he did sermons that help people understand the Bible or whatever, that mystery. So I think, Jay, if there's one underlying factor, it's judgment of what other people will think about us because of the big dream I might have, or a dream. It could be bigger, it could be enough to go on a vacation, right? Well, we can't do that. We can't afford it. Why are we doing that? Well, I really want to go because it'll help me relax. Okay. Anything, you can look at this in any way you want, right? But anything to get in the way. So judgment, but I think one of the huge things that I've experienced in my life is people are attached to outcomes rather than the process.
Hmm.
They're attached to outcomes. And listen, you should have great dreams, you should have the desire, you should have the goal, and you must have them, actually. Okay, you cannot not have them. But you can't be attached to that. Once you have it, great. Now it's time to put it into action, right? And that leads us to that decision piece. But if we're attached to outcomes, we skip on the learning. I'm attached to getting the sale. But wait a minute, what did you do to get to the sale? When you're speaking with people, I talk to salespeople all the time. They're attached to the commission. They finally worked hard, finally got a lead. They did all the work. They got in front of somebody to make a presentation, and then before you know it, they're thinking, "Man, this is going to be it. This is going to pay the bills for the next year." The list goes on. But they're so attached to that outcome, didn't listen to the prospect talking to them, and thus they didn't get the agreement signed, so to speak. They didn't get the deal. They walk out going, what did I do wrong? Man, this was going to be a great commission. Dude, you were thinking about the commission and not the client. You were attached to outcomes. And this goes along with everything that
Mhm.
we do in life. It's not perfect. Don't get me wrong. It's all, you know, if I could just walk around not being attached to outcomes, I mean, it's going to happen. It's part of the deal. So that's what that is. I think that's going to break the pattern of most people and people give up on that, Jay. They have these dreams, they have this desire, right? And because they're wanting to prove to somebody else, right? Let me show you, no, show yourself. Just as a make a note, if you're going to write something down, write this down. Okay. Just take care of yourself, but I'm going to go do my job. But at the end of the day, those are the impede and these are things that are impediments to people moving forward, you know, at a higher level because okay, I'll start it. They don't support me or I'm not going to be, let me just try this thing out. But then they go back to this, what are people thinking about me? I'm attached to these outcomes. So it's a wavering that we got to move through.
You talked about learn, do, review, and repeat. How do you actually um, review? Because my thought would be people might do and learn through doing, or like people might learn and do, or people might learn and not do enough to get to review. But I'm thinking maybe people miss or skip the review piece.
It's an assessment. Like I would do it, I would review it, and then I would come back. And I learned this years ago, and frankly, it was unconscious. It wasn't really, we didn't have coaches back in the day. We read books. I'm talking about the 70s and 80s and 90s. It wasn't like it is today. Everybody's a coach, and, I did some sales and I can go teach this stuff. So I did it on my own, and I would sit back and I'd leave a meeting or a presentation. I'd sit in my car or whatever I was doing, and I'd write down what went well here. What can I do to improve?
Oh,
What are the things, where did I make a mistake? Don't say a mistake. People say that. Don't say the word mistake. It's negative. Well, dude, I blew it. Okay. It's okay. I failed at that. I'm not a failure. So I got to go out and do it again. But that's really it's an assessment. And you got to do it. What I would tell your audience is that doing it as fast as you can, meaning that if you're a leader in a company and you had a meeting, and if it went well, you stop and say, okay, how did this meeting go? What came out of this meeting that was so great? If the meeting sucked, you do the same thing, right? And then we can improve. See, it's the percentage of small incremental improvements through this review process, Jay. And then I go back in and I do that same. Let me do my next meeting. Let me make my next sales call. Let me have that next interview, whatever the case might be, and see what I learned from this past one. Okay, what I won't do, what improvements there are, and what let me keep consistent with what went well. Let me double down on that kind of a thing. Does that make sense? You know, so that it's an assessment. We're looking at our books every year, doing our tax returns. We're assessing where did the money go, where did it come from, etc.
do you remember a review early on that changed the trajectory of your career?
I do probably a few of them, but there was a time in my real estate business when I was in that space early on. That's when I left the restaurant business, and even the restaurant. I mean, those are good examples there, but there was that time when I was looking at my business and going, man, this just ain't working. Because I was watching other people have success, but I was looking at it differently. I was looking at they're winning, I'm losing, versus they're winning. What are they doing? Let me go do what they're doing. And that was a breakthrough for me. I mean,
Mm.
literally after 2 years of sucking wind in sales business. Mind you, I had a successful restaurant, no education. We started it from basically ground zero, right? We turned it in from a family restaurant to a nightclub with, comedians from all over the country. And it was that point when I said, there's got to be something better here, if that makes sense. And that's kind of, there's different experiences, that you go through that. And I think, we could take all of I attribute this mastery thing, Jay, to everything. We can apply this to parenting, raising a family, you know, um, we can do a number of things there that help us through this process. So there was a few experiences, but that was the breakthrough for me for in one area.
Um, I'd like to understand what your, how you suggest integrating, because you brought up artificial intelligence, how you suggest integrating it into one's business, one's lifestyle through the lens of your 8 phases of mastery. If I understand, we talked about desire a little bit. We'll talk about decision, commitments. I think it's formulation, stabilization. I'll let you expand on that. But the AI piece, because it seems as though your take is that it's valuable, but we shouldn't lose ourselves within it. At the same time, we can get more of ourselves from it. And if you can elaborate on that a bit, um, because I think our audience can get a lot from your take on how on it and on AI.
Yeah, I if I sit back and I look at technology in its essence, it's made, there's two parts to this. And bring me back in, Jay, if I, but there's two parts to this. There's the horse and carriage, and then there's the Tesla, right? Okay. One gets us there faster, easier, perhaps with not, any driving skills, is just plug in a button and takes you to your destination, right? That's the that's the model that gets us there. So the challenge with that, from the people that did the horse and carriage thing to the people that drive the Tesla, is they didn't have the reps inside. The guys driving the rest Teslas don't have the reps that got them, that the guy who had the horse and carriage, who had to sweat, it was drudgery every day. It took him, 3 days to go 10 miles, okay, so to speak. Technology has, it's a gift, and it's also, in my opinion, been a curse. Not in a bad way. I don't want to make it sound like, oh, it's devilish, because I use it extensively, extensively. And I encourage everybody to use it extensively. It's only a support mechanism. The distinction for me in mastery are people using technology in a way that there's two ways to use it. I use it to help me and serve me and support me, gives me ideas. It helps me brainstorm. It helps me articulate, the good, what I'm doing well, where I can make improvements. It's all good with that, managing our time, looking at our emails. We have co-work and a number of things that are available to us. We can create outstanding videos. We could take this recording and refine the final edit, so to speak. It's there for that, and it's great. But the challenge with it, just even before AI became more mainstream, was technology was an interrupt on our communication skills, our ability to talk to each other. I mean, just go when you go to the grocery store today, if you go to Costco or whatever you're going, this is not a plug for Costco, but I mean, it could be. But when you go to the store today, look, the biggest business in the future, in my opinion, is going to be chiropractic business, because people's heads are down like this all the time, right? Um, it's going to support and serve us, but it can't replace our critical thinking. It cannot replace our engagement with other people. I think that's a challenge. I mean, we see it in our world today. We hear about it with kids and their families, right? They're spending more time on technology. We used to run around the block. My mother would scream, 2 acres away from where we lived in Miami, it's time for dinner, and that was being nice. Okay. So AI is an integral part, an important part, but you need to get behind the wheel and actually drive the car. You need to know, is there a stop? What does yellow mean when that light goes on? What is it? What does green mean? What does stop mean? You have to understand the critical thinking that comes with it. It gives you ideas. It's like the books, gives you the ideas, concepts, Brian's experience, Tony's experience, Earl Nightingale's experience, Ray Kroc's experience, right, from McDonald's. Um, but now I got to go and use, okay, what does that mean? How does it identify with my why? Going back to that, right? Does this connect my dots, right? And so AI, I think, is going to be incredibly invaluable into the future, and it's refining every single day. I mean, the things that it's doing now, even just a month ago, is different. So I think it's a very important part. I hope I answered your question in that way, but we can't we can't lose ourselves to AI. We have to engage with it. We use it to leverage, but you have to look at it critically, think, does this make sense? It's like prompting. You ask a question, not good enough. You have to have a conversation with a question or two or 10 inside of that prompt that you're asking AI, because it shows your thinking, because it'll tell you good answers. Oh man, look at that answer. Well, that's phenomenal. What does it mean? What does that answer mean? Is it going to help me move forward? You know, does it match my style, my personality? Well, no, it's Jay's personality. So you got to kind of it's really comes down to critical thinking and your ability to communicate. Having conversations like you are having with me right now is rare. I mean, it seems like it's a lot because you go to YouTube, it's the second largest search engine in the world, and there's, millions of uploads and views on there. But fundamentally, we, and well, I like to see the guy behind the camera, but we're just consumers who are not creators, right?
Mm.
People don't want to create because they don't want to get behind a camera because they can't communicate. The essence of saying hello, you know, is versus texting and saying hello. Call up somebody, pick up the phone. I think I said this in one of our last episodes. Pick up the phone and don't, I believe there's calling, leave a voicemail. If it's that important with a business client, whatever, then text them, say, hey, I left you a voicemail, check it out, and then follow up with an email to confirm that they got all three, kind of a thing.
I want to acknowledge that you said about YouTube. Uh, I'm looking at consumers, right? We're consuming, and or then there's the creators that are creating. I've always looked at this medium as a co-creation. So we are co-creating the value of this. We as in like I'm a servant to the platform as host. I'm not, if I was talking to myself, maybe I'd be creating, but we're co-creating. I want to ask you about this though. Your horse carriage and Tesla analogy, I want to make sure I follow that. So, in your view, AI can shorten time, but it can't shorten maturity. Am I following that?
100%. 100%. You need the reps. You need to understand and experience. You have to have the experience. It's like enabling people, another person. Like if I had a sales team, perfect example. When we started in sales, we did everything ourselves, right? And then pretty soon we got so good at it, then we hired somebody to do some of the menial work, such as we, lead generation or prospecting, right? So, but we went through, if we skipped right to hiring somebody to do the lead generation for us, and I never did it myself, how can I actually teach the guy or what to look for with the person who's going to be generating leads for me? What am I looking for? I have no idea. An AI will explain something. This is the best way to generate leads. I never did it myself. Does that make sense?
Let's say that a 20-something-year-old listening to this builds a business 10 times faster than you or me using AI. And they're on the other side of that. What could they not have learned? What experiences would they still have to learn that AI couldn't give them?
They have to learn the ability to operate. They need to go through challenge, failure, because it is exponential, right? It is exponentially like here's a good example. Let me keep it simple here from that perspective. What we did to do seminars, Jay, we put two, three, 10,000 people in a room in a 6 to 8 week period of time, right? We did them, we did them in meetings. We went to companies, corporations, you mentioned that, and we do a 30-minute to 45-minute workshop for companies during a sales meeting. Could have been a leadership meeting. And we introduced our seminars and invited people to come to see Tony, Brian, or whatever we were promoting at the time, right? So we did that stuff belly to belly.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
Now we did it one to many, meaning there was a group on average of about 12 people. Historically, our KPIs indicated that's kind of what we did. An average meeting was about 10, 12 people, right? And we made anywhere between 4 to 4.75 sales per meeting that we attended, right? So what we did back then was belly to belly. What we can do today is not one to one, it's not 1 to 10, it's one to millions all in one fell swoop, right? But we had that experience, and the younger generation, right? If you look back, there's guys that are what we used to do, the thought leaders that I see today, and what I used to do, their advancement because they're taking pure advantage of it, of the technology, but at the same time, you know, Alex, perfect example, he's doing the reps. I mean, you can't miss a social media platform without him doing 10 to 20 or 30 recordings a day, thousands that he's doing. So you need to do the reps, you need to get the experience. And my challenge that people might have, my challenge is hoping that they're looking at the business versus I have this great exposure to millions of people. And yeah, I got some subscribers and I got, millions of likes, but what does that really mean? What happens if the platforms shift? Did you grab emails? Are you able to call up to people and say, hey, by the way, I knew you were on my platform over here. Okay. Are you able to communicate with them? I think that's kind of that's it's a fine line there. And man, going back, knowing what I know now, what is available to us now, this would have been a gift. 1,000 people. Tony hits a button on Facebook. He does these 3-day events. He's got millions of people standing in one space. They didn't even get on an airplane. Okay. And he's talking to millions of people when we were doing thousands at the time and traveling and doing our, work. That's we went from that horse and carriage style, okay, to the Tesla today, which is, and it's great. I mean, it's really phenomenal. But just know what needs to be learned here in this experience of my massive growth and access to this tech that can literally shift my generational legacies.
I want to acknowledge you and actually maybe urge the audience to listen to part two of this and go as we go through the 8 phases because I actually would say I think well the Alex example exemplifies your thesis, which is the cross of the synthesis of the old and the new. And what I mean by that is when you were on the road making those, doing those presentations, bringing people physically together in an age that no longer exists, if I understand that correctly, that builds a certain constitution, a way of being in the world.
Hmm.
And if we look at the Alex case study, that was the beginning of his career. Then coming into the technology piece, the content piece, right? So we have a case study of exemplifying your thesis, I think, of not only using AI and being dependent on it, or not only being in the world and with the people, but both. And I want to, the reason I'm acknowledging that, I don't think, and I think that particular case study, that person isn't just, you know, excelling against the competition. It's almost like they have all the market share. So I think it proves your thesis, at least from an anecdotal example of what you're trying to. Um,
It's a collaboration. It's a collaboration of the hard, challenging, chop the wood, carry the wood, then we align with technology. Get into your AI. Ask them to ask you questions to your style. You know, learn what's going on behind the scenes of their thought process. And I refine. No, that's not a good enough answer. Give me better answer. That's not right. That's not what I'm looking for. Things of this nature. But you got to, there is that connection to your point, Jay, that collaborative movement that we experience. I did the hard work. Now I got technology to take me there. I used to ride a bike to school. Now I can drive to school, right? I used to be able to, I took I took a car to the Northeast where my family's from, and then pretty soon I now can take a plane, right? So you connect those dots, and I'm so grateful that I was able to ride the bike because anytime I could ride a bike, I can always go back. It was Vince Lombardi who said it, guys. We're not going to do anything fancy. We're not going to do anything tricky. No scientists are invited into our locker room. We're going to be brilliant at the basics. We're going to be good at kicking, running, passing, blocking.
Mm.
Our goal is to take this ball and put it over that line over there more often than our opponents. But even more core is to carry that ball 10 yards every time you have it in your hands more than our opponents. And therefore, we will win more championships. Any questions? Good. I'm glad you don't have any because that's how we are going to run our team, you know. And so, if we could put this together, Jay, the world's your oyster. This is the combination to the vault, you know. And I think there's a lot of great guys. And personally, I'm picking it up, okay, at a high level. I mean, I got hundreds of hours of recordings. Been just to be transparent, I've been very private. I do a lot of private stuff with individuals and companies. And at the end of the day, do I know better? 100%, right? I mean, so it's incumbent upon us if we want to grow, right? And then you go down this path of mastery of your gig, yes, master AI, master communication, master talking to people, master this technology that we are learning from here today. Master yourself, right? And so um it's a huge disconnect, but the small connect that we might think it is the huge impact that we can have on our businesses and our lives. Well, I'm running a meeting on CRMs. Why don't you have a meeting with your people? Why don't you talk to them? There's a great book, Peter, In Search of Excellence, Tom Peters. When you go back and read that book, yeah, it was in the 70s, I think 80s it was written. He studied Maytag and GM and IBM, those type of companies that are still around. One of the things that I'd learned from that book was MBWA, management by walking around. right? Leadership, because this creates the connect to your business, which is culture. You know, my phone is not a culture. My phone is a technology to help me pick up a phone and have a conversation with somebody. It is you and I having this dialogue, not a monologue, right? In this particular venue that we're doing this on. If you're a creator on YouTube, you're having a dialogue with your community, with your world. If you're doing, campaigns, if you're building a business, these are these are engagements. They're not just arbitrary, right? And so, um, that's the piece. Connect the dots, belly to belly, one to many, and the world's your oyster. Kind of a thing.
Last question, just what are the eight high level eight phases? And then how can people connect with you? Because I'd like to do a part two to go through phase two
I
through
like to
eight.
walk that through, and yeah, and I'll give it to you in its essence. Okay,
And
there's
then
that.
how can people connect to you? Because maybe someone says, "Oh, I just want to have that one-on-one time with you to go through this process to
Yeah,
you know what
just
I'm saying?
you can go
So
to
make
my
it easy for
community,
them."
which is realprofitbuilders.com. Basically, I started a school over there.
Oh,
Uh,
nice.
yeah, school community, and it's in its raw because we just basically did it about a month ago, and I'm putting some finishing touches on it because I'm taking all of my work over the years and putting it in there for people to engage. So if you want to just join the community right now, for those of you who are listening, it's complimentary. It's on me. And if you do it, go over there, put your name in, sign up. Doesn't cost you anything. You're in for as a guest with Jay, and however you want to look at that, you're a lifetime member with me once you're in. Like I have a handful of people there now, but that's one way.
Love it.
And same, Real Profit Builders. That's my handle on YouTube, so you can meet me there. Top level desire. Why do you want to do what you want to do? Why is it important to you? And understand that. And remember, it's evolving, it evolves. Two is decision and commitment. Decision, I have this why. Okay. Now I got to decide to do whatever it takes. I made the decision. Yes, I want this and I will start it. Then commitment. Commitment is nothing more than sticking to what you are planning to do from the original time you made that decision. A commitment is something that you keep long after the time that you made that original commitment, that energy, that enthusiasm. Man, I'm going to be rich. I want to do this. I'm going to have a great company. I'm going to be a great leader. We're all, because I read this book, I went to the seminar, I listened to this great podcast with Jay and Mike, right? And yes, I want to make a change. I want to make an impact. We're so excited. And then when we start, we make the decision, then we make this commitment, and then we have to go to form, then we have to create the formula. What is the goal? What is the objective? I said it earlier, what's out there, and then reverse engineer. That's the step by step. Third, but the commitment is where people break. Well, that's gonna, the goal setting is fine, planning and all, but then we get into number four, which is concentration. What is concentration? Taking action. You got to put the plan into action. You desire, you made a decision, you got a commitment going on, you made the plan, now you got to do something with it. So you got to concentrate. And this is areas, this refinement could be 60, 90, 120 days, could be a year, could be 2 years. This energy that you're putting in, okay? You're putting the thrust in. It's like a plane taking off. The majority of its energy is done in the takeoff, pulling up passengers, weight, gas, fuel for the airplane. Then it gets to cruising altitude, right? Okay, and then you pull back the throttle a little bit, which is now some momentum. Okay, that's the next phase. So I go from desire, decision, commitment, formulation. Then I get into concentration. Then I start getting into some momentum. What are those momentum things? Those momentums are the hits. I start getting some results. I may make some money between the concentration and momentum side, but ultimately I'll get there. And then once you get into momentum, you got to be careful because momentum is the break for most people next to commitment because momentum gets us into ego. Oh, look at me, man. I got a deal here. You know, I opened up this company. So we get complacent, we get comfortable, we get cocky, right? No, what got you to momentum? The concentration. Okay. You can't miss on the, if you, because people bounce back and forth. After momentum, if you maintain responsibility by respecting that concentration got you the momentum, you now move into stabilization. Stabilization is where more processes and systems start to come together. Ray Kroc, you look at the McDonald's story, read the book Behind the Golden Arches. Great book. You can't get it on Audible. If you find it, please let us know. Put it in the comments somewhere if you see this somewhere. But it's a great book. It's about 500 pages. But that's where it's that element of stabilization that Ray and their teams put together these processes that replicated over 40,000 franchises around the world, right? So that's the stabilization piece. And then you move from stabilization to breakthroughs. Now, this is breakthroughs different from momentum because they're similar in nature, but they're different. The momentum was was that producing of the seminars, going on the road, knocking on the doors. The stabilization was now we got into systems and now we have, i.e., technology today to do similar things. We call them webinars, okay, so to speak. That's kind of what we did back then, but belly to belly. But this breakthrough phase is when you start getting massive spurts of results. Things just, man, how'd that happen? Because we had systems and processes and we were concentration. We were doing those things. And we get these spurts of results massively. Okay. And then breakthroughs are really, this is where we go to the next level. We begin scaling. We take one store and we open a second and a fourth and so on and so forth, if you so desire, right? Then once you get through that, it's mastery. Now, mastery is very few and far between for most people, just to be transparent, because they give up on the earlier phases. They lose their why. Somebody interrupted their pattern. They gave up on the commitment. Oh, it's a candy store out there, Jay, right? There's too many choices, too many opportunities. Well, this is not working the way it should be, but let me go do this because that looks better. It's greener on the other side. Excuse me. It's not greener on the other side. It's not. It just doesn't. Sure, if there's no consumer demand for a particular product, we should pivot, we should change, right? But mastery is where things just happen naturally. Pretty much, you're not even involved necessarily, right? You're just looking. I mean, the earlier stages beyond stabilization and breakthrough, you're working mostly on the business. Mastery, mostly, but mastery is where you're like 95% of the time you're working on it. You're checking in management. I think Warren is a great, Buffett. He's a great example of mastery. Yes, he mastered the stock market and investing and things like that, but he's brought these companies into Berkshire Hathaway, right? And all he does is, Andrew Carnegie said it best, like, put all your eggs in one basket and just watch the basket. Okay. Masters watch the basket, right? But there's one thing about masters that a lot of people miss on is they always go back to the beginning to confirm their desire, to confirm this decision makes total sense, to remain committed, to be in concentration, my team being in concentration. I got systems and processes, plug, play, make it happen, right? Okay. But here's the big kahuna, the big thing that a lot of people forget. or miss. It's not, and it's not purposeful, it's not intentional. It is what it is. They're good at what they do, man. I am never going to be like them. Well, that's not true. Anybody could do what Elon does because he's done it. It's already proven, right? Now, do I want to be like that? Will I ever get to what he's doing? I don't know. Doesn't matter. I want to strive for it because that's our potential. So, masters of what they do are learners. They're constantly learning. How can I refine? That's that review section, Jay, you mentioned, right? How can I refine this even better? I was with a client the other day. We were going through a process of conversations with clients that he has, and we looked at the question. And there was a question that was asked in the training I was doing with my client. And I said, "Give me," we were role playing. I role play with my clients, right? And so one of the things he was doing, I looked at it, I said, "Okay, good. Then let's go deeper on the questions. Let's layer it down." So masters refine. They get better. They're always learning. What's the next seminar? What room could I go to that I'm going to learn something from rather than being just the seminar leader, right? Both are great. I think you should teach, which I think, Jay, masters are learners, but they're also teachers. Let me give back, right? If you hold back what you know because you feel somebody's going to compete with you, steal it from you, listen, man, unload it. Get rid of it. Because you know what? AI can already answer the question. Back to our question on AI. There's no more information missing. All these books behind me, I mean, I can go in and say, "Do you know Brian Tracy?" Oh, yeah, he's one of high content, sales, executive leadership, Nightingale Conant, Tony Robbins. Oh, yeah, master of the money game. It's all there. Who's going to use it though? Right. And so, masters, learners, and their teachers. If you know it, my dad told us a long time ago, and for me especially because whatever I just picked it up differently maybe than my brothers and sister. But at the end of the day, he said if you know something, Mike, you're obligated to teach something. It's incumbent upon us to teach it. We hear the thing, if you see something, say something. If I know it, I've had the experience. If I've had a failure, I got to let you know. Guys, I blew it more times than I've had success. Now, the success that I've had has been great, no questions, but there's more challenge before the success. There's more chopping before you get the fire. So those are the phases. Just don't skip any because you can't. You're not allowed to skip. Well, Mike, can I just jump to phase number? Can I get, because we got technology, can I go right into stabilization and vet out the processes? Of course you could. Just type in a question. How do I set up a process and system for my business and company? But if you've never done it yourself, you'll never understand how it works. How can I make sure my team is doing it the way it should be done? And I think, Jay, that's the huge disconnect, while at the
Mhm.
same time, it's the greatest opportunity. Go do the thing, get dirty, screw it up, fail, come back, learn because you're not a failure. What you did may not have worked, but if somebody else is doing it, if there's a demand in the marketplace for what you got, then there should be no need for you to be worried as long as you're not attached to the outcome. So, 8 phases in a nutshell.
Mic drop.
You mean Mike drop out of the recording?
Yeah, it's a double
No
entendre or
pen, no,
something.
no pen, no pun intended or
That
whatever.
was great. I'm so excited to go. Well, I'm very excited to hear that all of our listeners can go to your website and be a part of your school as well and gain this information on a consistent basis. Um, Thank you so much for coming back in the Culture Matters podcast. Um, I can't wait for part two to go even deeper. And my personal, where I'm going to reflect on after this is when you said, this is how I interpreted, when you said you're at mastery, essentially I took it as, yeah, go back to phase one and review essentially. To me, that's a profound and also um, unique and useful wisdom that for our show. So thanks for being you. I'm excited for that in the personal self-help industry that I think personally, in my opinion, self-help industry needs some help in this next iteration of the world. So,
For sure.
man, I can't wait for next time. Mike, thanks for coming on the Culture Rounders podcast. If you're listening to this, I would challenge you to go listen to episode 46 and episode 397. And sure, if you're really into it, go listen to some more. And please share this with a friend, someone that you want. Well, yeah, if you've gotten it, give it. So share this
Yeah.
with someone important to you, and we will see you next time on the Culture Matters podcast. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you, Jay. Appreciate you. And appreciate everybody participating today. Thanks.